Good evening, and good evening, and welcome to Sports Hour on WNYF. I'm Matt Volz. We got a little bit of a shorter show for you tonight, but should still be a good one. So for starters, I'm joined by Jack Hoadley to talk about some NBA action. And Jack, wearing your Dallas Mavericks Kyrie Irving jersey, at this point I feel bad. For anyone who doesn't know, Kyrie Irving, Dallas Mavericks guard, was ruled out for the rest of the season. Jack, I'm terribly sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It seems like every week I come on the show, there's some new tragedy to talk about with this organization and their players and everything else. Pretty soon, one of the players' moms is going to have to step out on the court to play because that's how bad it's getting for the Dallas Mavericks. I mean, there's still a month left in the season, and they're without their best point guard, their three best big men. It's just not going well for the Mavericks overall, but I do not want to turn this into a Mavericks broadcast like it's been the past couple shows. So that's all I have to say on the matter.
Well, yeah, I kind of mentioned how I feel like it's similar to when Jenna and I go on for the Sabres, and we talk endlessly about how terrible the Sabres are, which they're scoreless at the end of the first period in their game tonight against the San Jose Sharks. But the rest of the NBA slate, so Dallas, obviously, this season has been challenging. I'll say politely challenging for Mavericks fans. But still, that's a team that has potential in what's a really close Western Conference playoff race.
It's a very close Western Conference, and the next closest team to Dallas in the 10th seed right now is the Phoenix Suns. They have 28 wins, which is 4 less than the Mavericks right now. So I think that that's a good opportunity for them to at least make the play-in. But when you're coming from the perspective of a fan and the organization, do you even want to anymore? Is it even worth it to go with this lost season and rush Anthony Davis, Derek Lively, and Daniel Gafford back from injury? Or do you just want to move on to next year? And on the topic of the Mavericks and the Sabres, I know the Sabres have been through some hard times these past, 14 years?
Yes, that is correct. 14 long years.
I don't think it's wrong to say that the Mavericks are having, as Mavericks fans, the most painful season in sports history.
What?
The most painful season in sports history. Because this is a team that was going to the NBA Finals last year, so I came into the season so high. And now you're coming out of it, and we're looking like a lottery team, completely due to our own doing. It's completely our fault. I think it's the worst season to be a fan of any team ever.
Jack, when I was 10 years old, the Buffalo Sabres deliberately tanked to get Connor McDavid and then proceeded to not get Connor McDavid and instead got Jack Eichel, who then, after several years of being stellar on a horrible team, was traded to the Vegas Golden Knights, where he immediately won a Stanley Cup. And then the very next year, 5 former Sabres immediately won the Stanley Cup with the Florida Panthers. In 2021, coming out of COVID, the Buffalo Sabres had Jack Eichel, Stanley Cup champion. San Jose just scored, by the way. Jack Eichel, Stanley Cup champion. Sam Reinhart, Stanley Cup champion. Braden Montour, Stanley Cup champion. Several future Cup champions. Ryan O'Reilly was gone by that point. Jeff Skinner, Taylor Hall, Rasmus Dahlin. And the Buffalo Sabres finished in dead last in the entire NHL. It's been a brutal season for Dallas. There is no way, that goal didn't count, by the way. There is no way that the Dallas Mavericks season this year has been close to what the Buffalo Sabres have gone through the last decade and a half.
Imagine if the Sabres did get Connor McDavid. He played 6 seasons for them, and then in the middle of his prime, he was shipped off to a team for Ovechkin? Is that the Anthony Davis equivalent?
No, Ovechkin's actually still good.
Yeah, well, either way, he's significantly older, and I think that this is far and away worse than anything that a Sabres fan's ever been to. But I won't say anything too egregious.
See, I can feel the thousands of Sabres fans in Western New York that would say, absolutely not. I mean, genuinely. So, I won't stay on this point for too long. But let's think about some good moments that the Dallas Mavericks have given you in your life as a fan. Right?
This season, I'm talking about like a single season that's the worst to be a fan of a team.
You ever had the goal does count, 1-0 San Jose. You ever had your team deliberately make themselves bad to get a certain player and then not get him?
Do you not know what happened on February 2nd, 2025? That was a trade that deliberately made us worse. It made us a worse team.
But it wasn't done to intentionally make the team bad.
Who knows at this point? They want to go to Vegas. The Mavs want to go to Vegas.
Nico Harrison wasn't deliberately trying to make the Mavericks a terrible team. Tim Murray in 2015 deliberately did everything to make the Sabres the worst team in the NHL. And we had to watch it for 8. There were fans that celebrated when the Sabres would lose games. Anyways, whatever.
You got 5 years of Jack Eichel out of it.
Enough
right?
about hockey. Yeah, and, you
don't get to do hockey tonight, so I think
I don't get to do hockey tonight because Jenna's out and we miss her so much.
I'm glad I reinforced a crash out by talking about
You know what? Anytime the Sabres are brought up, and of course I have the game aside the script
Great
right now.
play-by-play, by the way.
Well,
that was excellent. You should be on the PA system.
Providing some updates. Well, certainly the Sabres do need to make some changes. So, at least something needs to change. So anyways, a long tangent pivoting back to the NBA. So we talked about the Western Conference. The East also, besides obviously the two teams, the top, Cleveland and Boston, there's also some room for some movement there.
Yeah, the East bothers me right now because if the team that shall not be named anymore was playing in that conference, they would currently be the 7th seed. That's how the stark difference is between these two conferences, largely because the East is so top-heavy. Talking about teams that are going to make the playoffs, because I feel like we don't do that enough on this show when we talk about basketball.
Right.
But the Cleveland Cavaliers have been sensational lately. They've won 10 in a row. They play tonight, I believe. I don't know if they're live right now. They are going live at 8 o'clock, so right around right now. They've won 10 straight, looking for, I think, 11, and they're 50-10, which is the best start that any team has had since the Warriors in 2015-16. Yeah. So hopefully they don't blow a 3-1 lead in the finals to, I don't know, LeBron's Lakers, because they're the 2 seed now. They've risen up the West standings, and I think that that's a team that nobody's watching right now, because if they're playing this good right now, there's not 2 better players in the playoffs than LeBron James and Luka Doncic, and I think that they're going to be a team to watch when it gets to April.
Oh, yeah, I think that's absolutely a fair point. I think the Lakers are definitely, obviously we know that move made them stronger as a team, and that was a team that was stronger as it was with LeBron and the other, depth that they have, but I think as far as the Eastern Conference, obviously you have Cleveland and Boston. You have some other teams that are definitely going to be very competitive. My New York Knicks, the number 3 seed, looking solid. Fingers crossed. Everyone stays healthy and everything stays good. There's some other teams. I know Detroit is having their best season in recent memory after the last several years of just total despair in the basketball world. Obviously, anytime you talk about the East, you're going to talk about Milwaukee with Giannis for sure.
Absolutely.
And there's some other good teams in there.
I think that the Bucks are a real big sleeper team to watch, because when you have Damian Lillard and you have Giannis in the postseason situation, I think that you can do basically whatever you want. I think that the Knicks are good. I think they have to prove that they can beat teams like Cleveland, Boston, and even OKC if they somehow manage to get that far. But with Detroit, Detroit is having an awesome season. They've had one of their best seasons yet. An incredible turnaround from winning just what I believe was maybe 20 or so games last season, and now sitting at 35 games with a little over 15-20 left to play, which I think is outstanding. They've been one of the hottest teams in the NBA. Their 9-game win streak ended a couple nights ago, but they beat the Celtics to cap it off. So I think that's a pretty impressive run for them. But you look down the Eastern Conference standings, and it's not even close to the West. The Mavericks are currently the 10th seed in the West with 32 wins. The Bulls sit at the 10th seed in the East with 24 wins. The 21-win Brooklyn Nets are 3 games out of the playoffs right now.
And that's a Nets team that has been sort of described as, the fall off from, remember, a couple of years ago when they first brought in, Durant and all that, and it was Kyrie. They were supposed to be sort of the next great NBA dynasty. Another team that was supposed to be sort of up and coming and great in the NBA is the Philadelphia 76ers, and that's a team that's fallen completely off the face of the earth. Now, Joel Embiid getting injured every 5 seconds aside, they've had some other struggles on their team, and that's a Nick Nurse coached team that, Nurse is a successful coach, obviously won a championship with the Raptors in 2019. That's a team that it's surprising to see them fail as much as they have. And again, aside from their star player getting injured every 2 games, it's still surprising to see them struggle as much as they have.
I wouldn't wish coaching the 76ers on my worst enemy because you have the pieces around to be so good. You signed Paul George to this mega contract less than a year ago, and you flash forward to now, and there's a whole new song that people are calling the Washed Up song that plays in edits about Paul George on TikTok because of how bad he's been this year and how disappointing he's been this year. I couldn't imagine loading up an app that some people spend upwards of 2 to 3 hours a day on, and the first thing you see is an edit of one of your team's players to the Washed song. I think it's absolutely ridiculous, and I think that if there's one team that has it worse than that 10th seed in the West right now, it's absolutely the 76ers, because they don't even have a future.
No, they really don't. And the question, of course, is what do you do with Embiid? I mean, this is an MVP caliber player when he's healthy. Key word, when he's healthy. And that has been a major issue. He has missed so many games over the course of his career due to injury. And he's a great player. I mean, I'll set my New York Knicks fan bias aside and say that Joel Embiid is a phenomenal basketball player. When he's at the top of his game, he really can take over a game single-handedly, and the 76ers are a threat. They're a dangerous team. But when he's not on the court, it is such a different team. And even when he has been on the court at times this year, it's just not the same team. It's been the last few years, Jack. So it's definitely, seeing them struggle is definitely a surprise. And you wonder where a team like that goes from here.
Absolutely. A lot of it has been the roster turnover. They haven't had a lot of familiarity, especially with the coaching and especially the players, because there's been so many moves being made. I do really think that the Philadelphia 76ers should just look at this team and say, okay, it's time to overhaul. It's time to give Tyrese Maxey whatever money he wants and ship Joel Embiid out. I mean, at this point, they could probably land Anthony Edwards for Joel Embiid. I don't even know what's impossible anymore. Maybe the Lakers will take him for Luka. I mean, I've heard worse. I think I would have rather gotten Joel Embiid in that trade than Anthony Davis, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll trade him for a long-term player or a long-time veteran player who's definitely struggled with some injury concerns and has totally fallen off, like maybe someone like Paul George. Oh, wait. They have Paul George.
They already have Paul George. I mean, Tobias
wait, they also have Tobias Harris.
He was already on the team, so maybe they want him back. Maybe you get Tobias Harris back.
Maybe,
send Joel Embiid to the Pistons. I don't know. The NBA is in a weird place right now. You have to talk about the fact that this offseason is going to feature Kyrie Irving as a free agent, Kevin Durant on the trade block, definitely Joel Embiid on the trade block. They'll definitely take a look at it. It should be an interesting offseason for a lot of teams who are like right on the cusp. I think the Warriors should be active, and a lot of those guys. Maybe not Kyrie. I personally hope he stays where he is right now, even with his torn ACL. I would love to have him back next year, but I don't know. There's a lot going on in the NBA right now. There's a lot of parity, and there's a lot that needs to get better. So.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it would be something where it would, if the Warriors got Kyrie, I think that would bring up some bad memories from 2016. And plus, not really sure where they'd play him because Steph Curry does play at the one. Also, the Sabres did just score, so it's a 1-1 hockey game. But we'll give some claps for the Sabres because we're not talking hockey tonight. But it will be a fascinating NBA offseason to watch. But before we get there, there's the sprint to the playoffs, and it's going to be. It'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I'm deflated, Matt. I can't lie. I don't know. I don't even know if I'm going to tune into the postseason basketball this year. I think I'll be rooting for the Nuggets. I'd like to see Jokic get another ring. I don't know. I mean, like a lot of like the top teams just that we thought would be there aren't there. The Pelicans had a really good roster on paper. Zion's just probably worse than Joel Embiid at this point with staying healthy. The Phoenix Suns have been the biggest disappointment in the NBA. I mean, you have so much talent on that team. And then, obviously, Wembanyama in the Spurs, him getting injured was just a huge deal for them. So there's a lot of teams in the West that looked so promising and then weren't, which gave a lot of openings for, like, the Kings, Clippers, Rockets to kind of take that jump, which I think is what you're seeing in the NBA this year. But it should be an interesting postseason for sure.
Yeah, and we talked about it last week, too, what the Spurs might be able to do. Now, you think about, okay, Wembanyama's out for the year. Think about that might be a team that's already solid and young. They've got injuries. What if they make a move? What if in the offseason they get a top draft pick and they land a really good young player? We could see the San Antonio Spurs, even though Greg Popovich is looking like he may not be the coach there anymore. Who knows? The San Antonio Spurs could be back to their winning ways, Jack. I mean, it's definitely possible.
God forbid they get Ace Bailey or Cooper Flag.
Something like that. I mean,
that would be probably just the craziest team I think I've seen assembled if they all develop the right way right now.
You know what? Maybe they just decide, you know what, we're going to totally build around Wembanyama, and we're going to go find every top French player that we can get and just make that the whole theme, something like that. You get the French flag flying, hand out baguettes at the door or something like that. Just do anything to sort of build that team, and they're a team that has an intriguing future. Get them in. Exactly right. Exactly right. Well, thanks for joining me, Jack. We're going to take a short break. When I come back, Brock Papke's going to join me to talk about some WWE and NASCAR action. I'm Matt Volz, and you're watching Sports Hour on WNYF.
So don't get nervous, sign your name for selective service. It takes no time, just sign on the line at the post office for selective service.
Hey guys, if you're about to turn 18, you've got to register with Selective Service. It's simple. Just go down to the post office, fill out a card, and turn it in. That's all there is to it. There's no draft now. You're just adding your name to Selective Service's list in case there's a national emergency.
So if you're 18 now, Selective Service, you gotta get down to the post office.
Register with Selective Service. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the law.
Takes no time, just sign on the line at the post office for selective service.
When you think of the local lowdown, what do you think of?
Well, when I think of the local lowdown, it's the live music that we have played in the studio.
It's got to be the laughs we shared. The memorable moments during the whole thing. Oh my God, so fun.
The local lowdown for me is the people behind the scenes, the amazing team that we have making the show.
Oh, it's gotta be exploring all sorts of genres and music I've never heard before.
Oh, easy. Going out to shows and talking to artists and getting the latest news on what they have planned for the future.
It's about these artists, man. Giving them a platform to showcase what they've worked so hard on and show their music to the community. It's all about supporting the local scene of music to keep it running for years to come. And of course, the band merch. You can't forget about the merch.
Welcome back to Sports Hour on WNYF. I'm Matt Volz. I'm now joined by Brock Papke, and although we have the NASCAR slide behind us, we're going to start talking about something just a little bit different, and it was a big-time weekend in the world of wrestling. The WWE had some major interesting developments last weekend.
Yes, sir. For those who know what WWE is, it's a wrestling sport which is mainly fake, but like, hey, it's still people beating the crud out of each other, so it's still a little fun. But the main thing is that our good old buddy, the star of Fred the Movie, turned heel. What you don't know is Mr. You Can't See Me. He can't. You can see him now because he got turned into like a villain. What turning heel is, it's more or less what Superman turned into Batman, or dare I say, Superman turned into Homelander. So what he did is, I'll try to speed up because I also want to talk about like our main topic right now.
Absolutely.
So the main highlights is Mr. You Can't See Me beating the crud out of Jake. I almost mistaken him again. Logan Paul, the inventor of Prime, not the word, the drink. Him having a little rekindle moment with CM Punk, and also him meeting the final boss. And who is the final boss, you say? I don't know why. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Apparently he's the final boss. He looks like the final boss because he came out with Travis Scott for all I know. Yeah, Travis Scott, he was also at the event for some reason. Probably just to sell him the Travis Scott burger, probably, who knows. But him, they were trying to do like a rekindle moment with Cody, what's his face, blonde hair guy. And, well, Well, he kind of got belt to ass with the guy after he switched to heel. So I'm just going to say that it was one hell of a weekend for WWE.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. I was not there, but I had some friends who made the trip up to Toronto to go see it, and that was pretty much all I heard about that whole night. My phone was blowing up with texts of, John Cena's bad now. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. And of course, me being the sports host, I can say that the percentage that I know about WWE is probably approximately 0.5%. I know who Dwayne The Rock Johnson is. I know who John Cena is, and that is pretty much it. So to hear people talk about a WWE wrestler that I actually knew was kind of exciting, but to hear them talk about how John Cena had turned bad, I was very confused, and I needed many detailed explanations on the lore and background of the WWE. So now I'm caught up to speed.
Yes.
Which is interesting, which is a good segue to something else that features speed, of course.
Yes. Before we do that, perfect meme of the night. When you ever get turned villain arc, here you go. But anyways, there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And becoming the villain is something that maybe the Kansas City Chiefs know all too well, but we won't talk about the Chiefs on this show. This isn't about football. This is about football, of course. We're going to talk about the NASCAR Cup Series. And Christopher Bell, back-to-back wins, taking the win at the Circuit of the Americas last weekend. So he has now won 2 of the first 3 races. And there's been sort of some very good back and forth, but one of the drivers I want to talk about who has really struggled this year is Ty Gibbs. He's someone who was a potential contender for a championship last year, who's been easily one of the worst drivers on the Cup Series circuit so far this year. I looked at it, Jimmy Johnson, who ran 1 race this year, he's running a part-time schedule, and he ran the Daytona 500. Jimmy Johnson, who, mind you, only got points from that 1 race, Jimmy is 3 spots ahead of Ty Gibbs in the points. Ty Gibbs, who is running for Joe Gibbs Racing, who is one of the premier teams in the Cup Series, driving the number 54 Monster Energy Toyota. To see Gibbs struggling as much as he is definitely surprising. But, Brock, it could be an indictment of Joe Gibbs Racing as a whole. I mean, we just, there was a penalty issued to Chase Briscoe in the 19. It kind of seems like Joe Gibbs is becoming Denny Hamlin in the 11 running well, and the others kind of struggling and falling behind.
Indictment? Who's getting arrested? Okay.
Well, yes. I use fancy words. I have to educate the viewing public here, Brock.
Well, I'm just saying. But,
yes.
but no, Gibbs, he's doing well. I do agree with him kind of falling off just a tad, but we're in the beginning of the season, so we got time, honestly. But I think it's more or less him. Taking a little, taking the foot off the pedal, if you would say, and more or less him, that was a perfect example. Him just trying to take the load off, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll put my NASCAR fan hat on for just a moment and talk about the incident that happened on the very first lap of the race. Some very aggressive driving from Ross Chastain, and he ends up making contact with and pretty much just straight up dumping Chase Elliott, who of course is my favorite driver. And it didn't end Elliott's day. He ended up still picking up a top 10 finish, because that's the thing where if you're going to have a wreck, or if you're going to spin, you're sort of fortunate to have it early in the race. You've got time to rebuild the car and all that sort of stuff. But the issue I had with Chastain's driving is that it was one of the very first turns of the first lap of the race. There's absolutely no need to be driving full force and sending it down into the corner and just recklessly driving. This is something we talked about a couple of weeks ago, talking about Joey Logano. And it's frustrating to NASCAR drivers, and it's frustrating to fans when you see a driver being way too overly aggressive, way too overly careless, and causing someone to have their day at the very least hampered that early in the race.
It's annoying when you're trying to have an entire race where you're going around the track 15 times, but at the first lap, you're just you're playing. Oh my God, I'm losing my train of thought. You're just really just trying to hurt someone on the first lap. Who does that stuff?
It's just that's my frustration, and that's not to say anything super overly critical of Ross Chastain as a driver, but it just, we've seen that sort of this year where there has been some very aggressive driving.
Yeah.
This is my argument. That's my argument against the stages that the races have been split up into. I don't agree with it because of the unnecessary sort of, I get it, they wanted to create those dramatic moments, that close, tight racing, but it ends up creating unnecessary bumping and banging and crashing that it just doesn't need.
It's just unnecessary alone how like people can generally like drive like that in like the first lap. Like, maybe like later down the line when like you're getting a little tired and such, but not the first lap.
Yeah, I mean, you see that sort of driving, if it's on the last lap of the race, okay, yeah, the last lap is kind of generally agreed upon. That's every driver for themselves.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be an issue if it was one of the last turns of the race. It was the fact that it was one of the first turns of the very first lap of the race. I had literally just turned the TV coverage on, and the very first thing I see is as soon as, I put my number 9 camo hat on backwards and I turn on the TV and I'm excited to watch a full race. And the very first thing that I see when I turn it on is that number 9 car off the pace and sideways. And it's frustrating to fans, even beside the fact that it was my favorite driver. It's frustrating to fans that you see drivers get taken out this early as a result of such aggressive driving. And I think that that's something that NASCAR has to fix. Now, they do usually sort of police it themselves, the drivers do. It's sort of, someone intentionally takes somebody else out, and there's payback. We've seen that in years before. Even Elliott hopped on his radio and sort of said something to the effect of, the next time I see the number 1 car, he's getting it back.
Yeah.
And so there is this aspect of sort of drivers policing themselves.
Yeah.
So there is that, but still, it's something you'd maybe like to see lessened a little bit.
Yeah, I think that should have been like a little more investigated, but like that's on me. But it's pretty funny that he just says, you know what, I'm probably just gonna, and next time I see him. But like it's a sad thing to see that, but hey, it's just one isolated incident, I'll tell you that.
And that's something that Chase Elliott actually got suspended for last year. There was a race at Charlotte when he and Denny Hamlin had gotten together.
Yep.
And Elliott ends up on the front stretch. He ends up right hooking Denny Hamlin, takes him out, goes up behind the right rear bumper and spins him around and sends Hamlin going nose first into the outside wall. Now, obviously, that's dangerous. You don't right hook someone deliberately, and Elliott was, and I can say this as a Chase fan, he was deservedly suspended for that. And we've seen that happen. I can think back, if we want to bring the conversation back to Joey Logano, I think back to years ago, was it 2015, I think? Yeah. They were running at Kansas, and Logano had deliberately spun out Matt Kenseth clear as day. And then fast forward to the race at Martinsville, Logano's contending for the win. Kenseth is a lap down, but he gets his chance and totally takes out Joey Logano, and the entire crowd cheers, which was, as a Joey Logano hater, that was a beautiful thing to me to watch him get taken out. I see why he'd be frustrated, but that was a beautiful thing. And if I remember correctly, that was also the race that Jeff Gordon won to put him into the championship that was his last career win. I think that was the same year.
Yeah, that was the same year,
I believe so. Things come full circle in NASCAR, because then, of course, when Gordon retired, Chase Elliott was the one who filled his spot in the Hendrick car. So I'm curious to see. We've seen some really good racing so far this year, Brock, and that's kind of led to a lot of the beating and banging and crashing and that sort of stuff, and and which is not uncommon in NASCAR history. Yeah. We've seen that many times, that this sort of physical aspect of racing, and I'm excited for so the race is coming up. They are at Phoenix. Which Phoenix is the race that, of course, hosts the championship in November. So that'll be one that's good to watch. The stretch that I'm probably the most excited for is the 4-week stretch, end of March, beginning of April. So March 30th, they're at Martinsville. April 6th, Darlington. April 13th, Bristol. Then they've got a week off, and they go to Talladega the last weekend in April. It is always so much fun. Those tracks, talk about Martinsville being, a smaller track. Darlington is the same way. Bristol is the smallest track, so there's always physical racing. You go from the smallest track to the biggest one in Talladega, and there's always going to be plenty of, beating and banging crashes and that sort of stuff at Talladega. So that's always a fun race to watch. That should be a very fun stretch. But of course, a few to get there is Phoenix on Sunday, Las Vegas the Sunday after that, and then Miami after that as well.
Yeah, it's going to be one heck of a stretch of a race schedule right there, because you're going to go to like the smallest track to the largest, so like the most compact and like most dedicated to crashes. I'm probably I'll throw a prediction out there. There are probably going to be like more crashes than like the not the championship, Daytona from this year. So but like compared to that, to like Talladega, that's going to be like, they literally made a movie out of it. It's like Ricky Bobby.
A great movie.
A fantastic movie. And it's just an entire thing on itself that has a legacy towards it. And I think like they should treat it as such. So if it's going to be like, crashes and all that such, then, well, it's going to be a part of that legacy anyway. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of what Talladega always is. I mean, they have at the super speedways, they specifically have the big crashes that are referred to as the big one, and it always happens. It's not, I've always heard it's not a matter of if the big one's going to happen, it's a matter of when it's going to happen. And there's always sort of, they say about the super speeders, about those big tracks. We talked about it a couple weeks ago talking about Daytona. At Daytona, you can't plan to win the race, really. You plan to put yourself in a position to win the race, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And that's something that that's something that the late, great Dale Earnhardt knew way too well, going 0 for 19 before finally winning the 500 in 1998. But this season's going to be interesting because we're sort of seeing not the same teams dominate. The last few years it's always been Joe Gibbs racing, Hendrick, and Penske. And years ago, obviously you have Roush Fenway, not really a dominant team anymore. Penske still kind of there. You see the rise of the team owned by Denny Hamlin. And Michael Jordan. So there's a lot of different teams, although the teams like Hendrick and JGR are still definitely going to be competitive. Well, that'll do it for this segment. We will take a short break. Brock, thank you as always for joining me, for sure. And when we come back, Sam will be joining me to talk about a different style of racing, as we're going to be wrapping up the show with some Formula One. I'm Matt Volz, and you're watching Sports Hour on WNYF.
No time, just sign on the line at the post office for selective service.
Hey guys, if you're about to turn 18, you've got to register with Selective Service. It's simple. Just go down to the post office, fill out a card, and turn it in. That's all there is to it. There's no draft now. You're just adding your name to Selective Service's list in case there's a national emergency.
So if you're 18 now, Selective Service, you gotta get down to the post office.
Register with Selective Service. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the law.
Takes no time, just sign on the line at the post office for Selective Service.
When you think of the local lowdown, what do you think of?
Well, when I think of the local lowdown, it's the live music that we have played in the studio.
It's got to be the laughs we shared. The memorable moments during the whole thing. Oh my God, so fun.
The local lowdown for me is the people behind the scenes, the amazing team that we have making the show.
Oh, it's gotta be exploring all sorts of genres and music I've never heard before.
Oh, easy. Going out to shows and talking to artists and getting the latest news on what they have planned for the future.
It's about these artists, man. Giving them a platform to showcase what they've worked so hard on and show their music to the community. It's all about supporting the local scene of music to keep it running for years to come. And of course, the band merch. You can't forget about the merch.
Welcome back to Sports Hour on WNYF. I'm Matt Volz. I'm now joined by Sam to talk about Formula One. Just a quick Sabres update. It is a 1-1 game with 4 minutes left in the second period. Just wanted to make sure everyone watching it at home was well aware of that. So pivoting to Formula One, talking about a different style of racing. So Sam, where are we at in the Formula One season, and how are things shaping up so far?
We are at the beginning of the season. The official racing hasn't started yet. We still have about 2 more weeks until the first race on March 16th. Though we are back, the drivers are back in the cars. They've done preseason testing, which was about a weekend last weekend, February 26th to the 28th, where they just kind of test the things that they couldn't fully test in the factory, making sure the car actually fully works on the track. And then they like to test whether or not the car can hold up on track and things like that. And then they officially put the drivers in the cars on track. It goes to the Bahrain circuit, which they do end up racing on later in the year.
Yeah, so the season's sort of just getting ready to start. So who are we looking at as some of our potential favorites to win championships, whether that be drivers or teams?
Well, I'm biased. I want McLaren, preferably Lando Norris, because I'm a Lando Norris fan, to win. But I have a feeling McLaren is going to get to the top like they were last year. I have a feeling Lando might be the world champion, though Max and some of the Ferrari people are very high up there in that chance of still being. Obviously, you have Lewis Hamilton moving to Ferrari, controversial take from last season that he did that. You have Charles Leclerc still in the Ferraris. You have Max Verstappen in the Red Bulls, who is, I think it's about an 8-time world champ. No, it's like 4 or 5 world drivers champion. And then you have Liam Lawson, who was in the V-Carb last year, second half of last year, in the Red Bull this year, replacing Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, who he got dropped like right at the beginning of winter break, and it was due to performance reasons, quoting Red Bull there. Because honestly, it was a very good reason, because Sergio Perez hadn't been performing well enough last year compared to what Max was able to do. So it was a very good, actually good choice in it. But I have a feeling McLaren, Red Bull, and Ferrari will be our top 3 like it was last year, with McLaren taking home the win and then Red Bull probably either being second or third. So yeah.
Yeah, it'll be so as the season sort of begins. Obviously, anytime you talk about Formula One, the name Max Verstappen is going to come up as a potential champion, and he's been really dominant for the last handful of years. So, you already talked about some favorites who could be talking about. So, what are some of the more exciting events that you're looking forward to in the Formula One season?
Honestly, all of the races, quite frankly. The races, it's been a solid, I think it's about 14 weeks, 2 months since we've had cars on track. And it gets really sad and lonely on Sundays, because you're looking forward throughout that entire week. Oh, Sunday is the day of our race. So when you're going through those winter months and you don't really have much other than maybe some drama that's going on behind the scenes, you can watch that in Drive to Survive on Netflix, though. It's kind of saddening. So most of the time, it's just Sundays that you kind of look forward to as a race fan.
It's definitely that's the case for any football fans as well. Certainly, I'm dressed in my Bills gear because it is Bills night at the Sabres game tonight, so that's why I have my Bills gear on. One last opportunity to dress up like the fanatical, crazy, borderline insane Bills fan that I am. But it's kind of a similar thing that you describe. It's the whole offseason, you're kind of just waiting for the season to start, and there might be some stuff that happens, but nothing compares to the actual races themselves. And NASCAR is the same exact way, where you spend the whole winter looking at your phone, tracking, okay, how many days do I have until the next race? What drivers are switching teams? What things do I have to look forward to? And another thing that is going to be interesting to watch are some of the rookies, some of the newcomers to the F1 circuit. So who are some of the rookies that you have your eye on?
Honestly, Kimi Antonelli. He's in the Mercedes this year, he replaced Lewis Hamilton. It's kind of weird seeing rookies in the bigger seats, because usually the rookies stay down in the lower grids, like Sauber, V-Carb, and Haas, which is usually where they stay. But they brought people who actually didn't even win the F2 championship. The F2 champion actually went to Sauber which is the lowest team on the grid. They are literally 10th overall out of all of the teams. So I'm very excited to see Kimi Antonelli. He didn't prove himself as well when he got the chance during, I forget which race that they're forced to like let their reserve drivers drive. But when he had that opportunity, he kind of decked the car into the wall.
Oh.
But I have a feeling he is going to work with this opportunity and going to get far with it.
Yeah, for sure. Any other rookies? Just, he's sort of the main one that you're looking at?
Him and Ollie Behrman. Ollie Behrman was in the Ferrari last year as their reserve driver. So whenever Carlos Sainz had gone out, they had Ollie Behrman. And he also was the reserve driver for Haas, who he's driving with this year. I have a feeling he's going to do really good. Fingers crossed that he is not better than K-Mag. I think Kevin Magnussen is still in the Haas. I'm not 100% sure on that one. But whoever he replaced, I hope that he can live up to that standards because it's a very high standard. Haas was never a top tier team. They were always a mid-tier team, but they were bringing it back, bringing closer towards the 4 or 5 spot last year. So it was a very huge opportunity for Ollie Behrman, especially given that he was given a seat after all of the teams saw how well he performed in the races that he did last year.
For sure. I mean, you get your younger drivers. This is sort of an opportunity for them to step up and make their names known. And it's in a sport that has been dominated a lot by one particular driver. There's the opportunity there for younger drivers. Real quick score update: the San Jose Sharks did just score, so the Sabres now trailing 2-1 with about a minute and a half to go in the second period, so hopefully that improves. But going back to F1, any other Formula One news, any new change, anything like that going on this year?
I'm going to quickly bring up Drive to Survive Season 7 is coming out March 7th, which is kind of ironic. It's the 7th season coming out on the 7th day of the month. Honestly, I'm kind of excited, though Drive to Survive has a very huge, feeling about it, that it's very dramatized. It's not actually very true to the nature of racing. But briefing over Drive to Survive, it's not very exciting. The FIA had instilled a new rule banning swearing, prohibiting drivers from speaking badly of the FIA. The FIA is the head of everything there. They banned speaking illy of the FIA, making political statements, which is, Formula One is very much so known for making their political statements.
Yeah.
I think they did a thing where it was talking about the LGBTQ. They've done nature stuff. So making political statements kind of was not a really good turn on them. The banning of the swearing kind of makes sense, but they're under a lot of pressure, so them swearing, especially when decompressing and cameras in front of them, it's going to be hard for them to actually regulate what they're saying. But honestly, it's kind of insane the punishments that they get. It says that after breaking the rules 3 times, they can get up to a £120,000 fine, or a 1-month suspension, or a point deduction. Which all 3, honestly, the fine is probably not that bad for especially people who are who've been racing for a while because they make a lot of money. It's a rich man's sport. But the 1-month suspension will affect the team significantly, and the point deduction will also affect the team significantly because you're getting rid of points that allow them to be higher in the championships, whether it's the drivers or constructors championship. And the 1-month suspension, they're going to have to put the reserve drivers in, which reserve drivers are good, but there's a reason that they're the reserve drivers. They're not their best choice. They have to. It would just make no sense for all of these rules. I understand from the research that I did that a few sports have similar things to this, but this feels a bit harsh for this sport.
I would agree. I mean, I just sort of thinking about NASCAR, I'm reminded of back in 2004, Dale Earnhardt Jr., after he won a race at Talladega in Victory Lane, in the excitement of victory, he had ended up swearing live on air. And nothing harmful. He was just in the excitement. He was talking about how his father had won at the same track so many times, and he swore. And NASCAR fined him, and they docked him points to the point where it arguably cost him a shot at the 04 championship. So it's really harsh. I'm surprised to see that.
Yeah. I don't know. It came as a very big shock to the drivers, to the fans, everything about it. The FIA has been very controlling recently, and they're not very proud. They're not very, like, the drivers and the people in charge are not very happy with their choices in, like, making rules and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully it's a good F1 season. Thank you, Sam, for joining me. And that will wrap it up for tonight's broadcast of Sports Hour. I want to thank all three analysts who joined me, Sam, Brock, and Jack, as well as everyone who works behind the scenes to make this show possible, and all of you watching at home. So we will catch you next week. I'm Matt Voltz, and you've been watching Sports Hour on WNYF. Have a good night.